the internet. I love the doorbell. It's like, ding, you're at your own house.
I didn't hear a doorbell.
Oh, it does the Zoom entrance.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
I'll let you know you're there.
Hey, people.
I know, isn't this wild? We're gonna talk on the internet together.
Mm-hmm.
Here with the friends, with the people.
And they're gonna be. You can see them chat and everything, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna watch everybody chat down here and interact, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe we'll have some questions, comments, and everything else. So, hi everybody. Welcome to today's Eat and Greet, and we are really eating today. I'm so excited. This is the first. Oh, hold on. There we go. This is the first Eat and Greet I've done where someone's had the courage to eat with me, Sam. So this is like,
oh wow, okay, yeah, no.
Deal. Everybody's so cute. They like bring their little drinks, and we're nice and professional about it. But we have real snacks, you guys. Real snacks today. So hopefully you brought your snacks as well. Eleanor says
Popcorn.
Popcorn, and I've got Gruyere cheese with nuts and dried fruit. So we're gonna actually eat and greet today. But welcome everybody. Welcome. It's so good to have you here. If you're watching on the replay or you're listening on the podcast, I am grateful to have your time and your attention. So hopefully we give you something today that is absolutely worth it. So we're going to talk about this moon that we've got going. All of us have a moon placement, and many of us may be really experiencing the depth of feeling, reaction from it as the world changes around us. And what does that mean? What does that look like? How do we work with that? So we're going to dive into that a little bit today. We're also going to talk about, in these changing times, what are our experiences being Black astrologers, being in this community, right? Right from some factual experience-based information. So, buckle your emotional seatbelts. And we're going to do a talk on the internet. Before we jump in here, though, there is still an opportunity to get signed up if you'd like to do some study with astrologyhub.com. I will put that in the description box down below. And the solstice gift will actually go out from me at the end of this recording. So you can watch the website, and you can also watch the description box down below for that as well. Every season I give a gift. So these will be up and they will be ready, and they will run from June until September until they are gone. Okay. All right, Sam. Welcome. Hi.
Hello.
How's that popcorn treating you?
Very well.
Just living the dream. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Because a part of this is truly introducing the community to other astrologers. You've been out there. You've been doing Sam, right? But maybe some of the tribe don't know you yet.
I'm sure there's a good number of people who've never heard of me. So my name is Sam Reynolds. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I live now in Newark, New Jersey, after, I want to say 17 years in Brooklyn, specifically Bed-Stuy. So I'm a transplant in Newark. And I've been an astrologer for 30 years, and that means studying astrology, talking about astrology, teaching, all that related to it. And I am on the board of directors for the International Society for Astrological Research, as well as the board of directors for the International Academy of Astrology. So I'm living out my ninth house sun. Very international, right?
Very international.
So I have spoken in different parts of the world, including South Africa, various parts of the United States on astrology. I write astrology for astrology.com. I have an article up there, in fact, that launched last night on possibly the second American Revolution, or I would say the unfinished American Revolution and Black Lives Matter, and horoscope.com. And I've written for tarot.com. So I've done both pop astrology and academic astrology. And I enjoy meeting other astrologers, especially Black astrologers. It's one of the reasons why I started with Dana Lynn Knuckles. We started the International Society of Black Astrologers, which is mainly now only on Facebook, but it is something that we're looking to expand and move beyond. And, some people may ask, well, like, why only Black astrologers? Well, in that particular group, there's only Black astrologers, but I believe in having safe spaces for everybody in, different quarters, like whether they're queer, and so there's queer astrology and queer safe spaces. so that we can mingle and be clear when we need to come together. So I think that's also important. So I don't think there's like, people are concerned about segregation. It's like, no, I'm not, advocating segregation as much as integration through more so reintegrating the selves, the selves that we find, like the conversations that you and I are about to have. So
yeah, that is so beautiful. And that's so neat to hear your experience kind of laid out. So I want to ask you, when I was reading your bio and getting to know you at first, this was not the field for you.
No.
What happened? What happened?
That's an interesting place to start, Stormie, really.
Yeah, I know.
So what Stormie's alluding to, if you haven't, well, many of you probably haven't seen my bio, I got into astrology trying to disprove it. And how that happened is, the shorter story is I was pursuing my master's and PhD in African American studies at Temple University. Ooh. And I was 23. I wasn't very certain on what my dissertation topic would be. And I felt a certain level of an implosion happening because I wasn't going along with the party line of my department in terms of how we looked at race, gender, and class. And it was more so, as we might say it now, more an essentialism, that Blackness, Africanity was this one thing. And I had serious questions about that. So as I had these questions, I started meeting different people, and I met the sister, Gemini, who was of the mind, like after getting to know me, and I had a crush on her. And what's significant is that she probably was 20 years older. She didn't divulge her age. She was a smart woman, but she didn't, reciprocate with that crush. She kind of like, she treated me appropriately as a kid, but without diminishing my manhood, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So she was really a good friend, but she was convinced, because I'm born on the cusp between Scorpio and Sagittarius, quote unquote cusp. And so I didn't know which one I really was. And I think that was one of the reasons why I also, now I can say this, I hated astrology, because I was like, well, which is it? Like this science or this thing doesn't even know like which I am, because I would read different things. And anyone who's born on the cusp kind of can sympathize with this particular experience. But she was like, no, I think you're a Scorpio. And I was like, no, I don't think so. If I had to choose between being the arachnid and being a centaur, clearly I would be the centaur, right? Clearly, right? So I happened upon an astrologer, and I wasn't looking for one. He just revealed he was an astrologer. And I was like, oh, this might be a way to shut this Gemini up. I didn't say it like that, but I was like, yeah, okay, I have some extra cash and I can get this reading. And during this reading, he revealed I was a Scorpio, and he revealed a good number of other things that went beyond guesswork.
Sure. That
really set me in motion to kind of like, there must be some kind of racket, some kind of game with this, because I had studied some magic when I was a kid, and I was like, when I say magic, I mean like prestidigitation, like trickery. And I was like, there must be some trick with it. And so I spent 10 years trying to unlock this trick, only to discover that there was no real trick as I expected it. And next thing you know, I became an astrologer. That's the kind of short and long of it. But yeah, that was not the trajectory, because once I left the academy, I went into acting and theater and poetry, more the creative dimensions of it. And I didn't expect, like, if you had told me at 30, well, you're going to be an astrologer, I probably said, like, you're crazy. And here I am, 22 years later.
You tell anybody at their Saturn return they're going to do stuff, and they're like, anyway, back
at the ranch.
Well, thanks for sharing that, because it's the pathway to and through astrology is not always just that you were born dreaming about signs. Sometimes the pathway, it just comes as it comes, but I think we all find our way home eventually. If you're called to it, come home, is my experience.
It's a very powerful way of putting it.
Yeah, well, here we are. And we're on the internet. About astrology, which I just love.
We're on the internet, but we're specifically on the World Wide Web, which is having a Saturn return right now, right? So we're in the Saturn return of the World Wide Web, which I find a momentous moment specifically because, Saturn returns is when we're dealing with return on investment, and, it's also a way in which we talk about, I usually say something that Ellen Oken once said to me is that, you spend the first 30 years of life making you, but that next 30 years is about you making life. And the Saturn return for the World Wide Web seems to highlight its usefulness. Mm-hmm. And where would we have been if we didn't have the World Wide Web during this coronavirus moment? I don't know. I don't know what we could have done, what would have been possible. So here's a return on investment and proof of concept for the World Wide Web.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that was like kind of tangent, but you just said that and made me think of that.
No, I love that. And that is something that was shared with me too. Like the first part is for you to figure it out. And the second part is for you to give it away and to
Correct.
be of the world. And so I love that. So, happy Saturn return, World Wide Web. We're here. We're taking advantage of what you have to provide for all of us. So
absolutely.
Brilliant. Sam, what has been your experience in this industry as a Black astrologer?
All right. I thought we only had an hour, but
right. We only have an hour, so the condensed version of that as well. But truly, this has been a time. You and I were talking during our strategy session-esque get to know each other time about.
And that was wonderful, by the way. It was wonderful.
Yes, so thank you. That was really nice, wasn't it? We're going to have to talk about more stuff.
Yes, we do.
But this idea of what that experience has looked like, what maybe there are some preconceived notions about being Black and being in astrology. And so instead of working in the wiggly places in between where things may be factual for one person and not for another, what we decided to do is just talk about what's been real for us and leave that on the table for people to
correct.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would love to hear your experience.
Well, and that's why I'm really excited about this conversation, because one of the things, we as Black folk have to frequently remind ourselves and others is that we're not a monolith, right? That there is no one, defining aspect of Blackness. You can meet someone who's into hip hop, vintage hip hop, and another person is like, go death metal, so there's a variety. And for me, in terms of my experience, it's been definitely varied. And in terms of, dealing with Blackness as an astrologer on a couple different ends that I'll keep in brief. One, attending my first astrology conference, this is something that I did recount on Chris Brennan's show recently. Attending my first astrology conference, I did encounter a moment of racism, where I, at a break, got on an escalator and a white woman was ahead of me with her crew and her friends. And the moment I stepped on, she looked at me and had looked back, and then she grabbed her bag to the front of her, right? Which, I knew from years of Blackness. Here I was, 30-plus-year-old man. So it wasn't like something new. Mm-hmm. It did surprise me. And then I was surprised that I was surprised. It surprised me that it happened in that space, because I think people always have this expectation that when we're talking about astrologers, we're always talking about, evolved, very spiritually minded people, and not realizing that astrologers are like anyone else in that sense, but our concern relates to the stars.
Sure.
Now, eventually, I became friends with that woman, to the point that we could have lunch and talk. Never brought up, and she probably doesn't know who she is. She could be listening to this and like, oh, he's talking about someone else, not remembering. Yeah, I'm probably talking about you. And it doesn't, I don't obviously need to say her name, and I wouldn't. And it's more so that it was an arc and a trajectory where we got beyond that moment because I didn't stay there. And I also got to know her. Now, I'm not making this as a statement for all white people, all Black people, right? As much as my particular experience. And I understand other dimensions and other people's experience. So for instance, I also have had moments where I've been in astrology forums and other spaces where I've seen Black astrologers shut down. And shut down because their take is different, their voice, their sensibility, their manner, you know, in terms of what words they use is different. And I think that is something I also have experienced. The other side of it is being a Black astrologer who's in white spaces and then hearing from other Black astrologers who say like, well, he's an Uncle Tom. I have actually heard that. Where people, you know, it doesn't matter that I have 2 degrees in African American studies, that I've never been shy about my Blackness, and, you know, that I have written articles related to this or on Black men and Black women. None of that matters to them. It's like, well, you know, you with them. And so I've also had that other experience of Blackness. You know, and for me, how I see myself in this community is as a leader, as someone who, you know, wants to encourage other Black folk, other people of color, not just Black folk, to be in these spaces, because there's nothing that prevents you from being there and from having the daring to rush into these spaces and claim what you can claim for yourself. And I don't mean like as a marauder and say, ah, man, just take this, this is mine. You thought this was yours. You know, it doesn't have to be like that, as much as kind of advocating. You know, I take a page from Ralph Ellison, who talked about in his book Shadow and Act, a collection of essays. He talks about the discipline of Blackness, the discipline of being a Negro, right? For him, that's what it was at his time. And what he meant by that is that by going through the pain and the history that we have endured collectively, and then even somewhat individually, depends on the person, right? Because you're going to give a different experience. But that should highlight more your sense of humanity and how you bring that humanity. And one of the things that I think Black astrologers of color can bring is a real knit and grit experience of humanity, not like a pie in the sky, like we're all one people, we are. But are we willing to respect all people and their experiences as very different? You know, especially this is the question that comes up with queer astrology. This is the question that comes up, but this is the question that always comes up with the issues of difference. And I guess nothing proves as striking as the issue of difference as even quote unquote skin color. And then one final bar, and I'm going to definitely hear from you, and I'll say with this, you know, this brings up a side issue that's related. I've always been kind of puzzled by blackface, right? And one of the reasons why I'm puzzled by blackface when, you know, some whites do it is what saddens me about it, what feels offensive is that in order to kind of take on someone's humanity or your vision of their humanity, do you have to change your skin color, right? You don't. Like when I play Gregory House, a character from the show House MD, for Halloween, I just dressed up like him, wore, you know, had a cane, you know, had some sneakers, popped some pills. They were really lemon heads, and insulted people all night at the costume party, right? That's kind of what I did. I didn't have to paint my face. I didn't have to kind of change my appearance. So I think what Black astrologers really bring to the conversation beyond just our experience, which may be very culturally diverse, right? You know, you grew up in the West. I grew up in the East. Very different experiences. Very different from someone who grows up in the South, right? Sure. So I think we're going to bring different cultural experiences, but I think the key thing is recognizing that are we willing to acknowledge the differences that we have rather than just, you know, because you have a different house system or you use a different zodiac. I think that's the dimension that happens with Blackness.
There it is from Sam.
What about you?
Yeah, well, you know, I think it was really nice to have this set up with you because you have been in the astrology industry so much longer than I have, and attending conferences and doing the things that astrologers do together to be able to hear your experience on it. This is my first year in official conferencing and things like that. So I've got just a different take as a younger set of experience there. But what I can say even before the conferencing is that my experience of being Black and being in astrology is that I have not yet experienced a limitation with it at all. My experiences, if I wanted to talk about it, I would need to find a way and a place to talk about that. And it so happens that YouTube is a perfectly acceptable place to talk about astrology and be whatever color you are, but specifically being Black. I actually found a fair amount of welcome onto the internet, into this space, into the things that I have to do and I want to say in this particular community. As it comes to the conferences this year, even before everything virtually, became virtual attendance, my experience was that if there weren't more Black faces at the conferences, it was likely because they didn't go, right? Not because it was kept from me. I have at no point felt like conferencing, learning, and welcoming was kept from me because I was Black, right? As a matter of fact, one of the thoughts, and you and I were talking about this, is in this realm of my experience thus far, it's been more like no one's felt as if they needed to cater to me to have me come. They just were waiting for me to say I'm ready to come to the table. And then the space was made abundantly available, which is tricky, right? Because for me, that's fine. And I did the work and I did the research to find my space and my place in there. But what do you do when you don't know that it's there and that's available? Do we naturally run towards places where we don't see a lot of Black folks being at? I was raised, we talked about this, I was raised in a pretty affluent, predominantly white community. So for me to run into places where there's all kinds of white people, that's not really weird, but that is maybe not someone else's experience in that. So as a Black astrologer from jump, it was an honor really to open this space up and say, hey, if your experience has led you to the mind frame that you're just looking for someone who is like you doing this, I am. And I get to kind of hold that space and take it forward into the conferences, into the books, into this industry in general, right? But then also, I think from that position, welcome people to step up, take accountability for their own step up into the work if this is what they want to do. So my experience thus far as a Black astrologer has been one that I think is good. Is one that I think has been useful, thus far. And it's always interesting to me when new subscribers will come over or new students join my class and they say, I didn't even know you were out here. It's so nice to see another Black astrologer. And as we've seen, as everything has come up, there are quite a few of us, quite a few doing good work, doing beautiful work. So it's like, oh, the awareness, being a part now of the awareness that it's like, yeah, we're out here, we're doing this thing. But it is neat to me personally to see it in that regard as well, because I was never looking for Black, white, or other astrologers. I was always looking for the information. I'm a genuine sun in the 9th house. I'm like, whatever, I just want your information, right? Just give me your information. Right. So it's interesting, though, to see that mirrored next to some experiences I've heard from some other Black astrologers.
Yeah, definitely. I think the key thing is, like you said, whether there's a stepping up. And I think the stepping up can come two ways. One way, definitively, is that like I did, we can step into these spaces and be like, yo, what you got? What's going on here? What's in here? Right. And I think we can do that. The other thing is, and nothing stops us, right? There's, one argument I have had with conservative astrologers who are more of the bent that, like, well, why do we need to do extra, when we're not being prohibitive? No one's saying no Blacks here, no Latinos here. It's not happening in that way. That's true. Where that isn't the experience. But I think the astrology community does have to ask itself a question. I think more and more in the community are asking this question. Well, when we look around at our conferences, who are we seeing? And when we look around at our authors, who are we seeing?
Mhm.
And is this okay? That we mainly see white folk, and again, this is not just a matter of like, well, no one's borrowing us. And that's true. No one is borrowing us. But are we also giving the encouragement, the clarity in terms of creating that diversity? And that diversity, by the way, isn't just about Black and white.
Right.
It's interesting that these writers who kind of have been bad-mouthing astrology, these journalists in the last 3 years have talked about it's mainly a female-dominated activity and industry, blah, 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 not realizing that for most of astrology's history, it was all men.
All men.
All men. And what's happened in the last, I want to say 50 years, is really coterminous with like changes that have happened in multiple industries. Women's lib, more women kind of coming into their own, but it was also men and women paving the other way for other women to come through into the astrology community. It didn't happen just by chance. Someone had to kind of give someone a chance.
Right.
And, and solicit like, oh, well, come in, be welcoming. And I think that's kind of the dual aspect of it. I have a question for you, and then I guess I know we have other things to do because we don't have as much time. But in terms of like your clients, students, people you mentioned, does your Blackness come into the mix at all in relation to that? Because there's some people who've asked me, like, does being of a different cultural background, influence who comes to you and why, things like that? How does that relate for you?
Sure. So I think in its moments it has, like, I mean, I know in its moments it has. I had a client less than a month ago, and she's a new client, and what she said is that she felt so comfortable with me because I was Black, and so is she, and she just felt like she could be comfortable talking to me, which to me is always more of a reflection of who I'm interacting with, right? But also an honor to say, yeah, cool, I'm a safe place. Let's do the work that needs to be done, right? But in terms of the rest of my clientele, man, I have got the rainbow going on over here, and I am always surprised at how many clients I get to spend time with who are Indian.
From India?
From India. Yeah, which I'm like, whoa, they are so lucky. I think they basically have got a religion that is so grounded that they haven't lost a lot of their astrological history and how they practice. So I'm like, y'all are coming over here to see these cheetah earrings and stuff. This is phenomenal. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful, right? Because that to me is a compliment. But in terms of, and is me being Black, is that a factor for other brown skin folks too? Maybe, but it doesn't typically come up. Only ever here and there. More than not, when I hear about it, it's like in a comment underneath the video, and somebody who didn't know I was out there or something like that. And they're kind of discovering and widening their own view of who's in the community in general, And then it's so funny. I had David Cochran over yesterday, and I just think he's a hoot in general. Because he's just so smart, right? And he says hi, by the way. He's totally pumped about you taking Linda's class. So he's so funny. Celeste Dolphin is one of the teachers of vibrational astrology. And he's so funny. He's like, so you and Sam and Celeste have darker skin than I have. He was so diplomatic, and he's so funny. He's like, it makes me so happy to see that in astrology. And I'm like, so I even think that truly, like you were saying, there is a welcoming, right? There's not been this like, you can't come in here, but there is a welcoming where it's like, wait, there's so much other cultural conversation we could be having. So, even from that perspective, I love it. And Stephen Forrest and Rick Levine, they're like, yeah, everybody come in.
That's true.
Yeah. It's
Rick
a brilliant
was gracious.
experience.
Yeah. Rick had me, he invited me and took me in for tarot.com for a few years. So I'm also grateful for that.
Yeah. He is. And he's so funny. I love too that some of our elders are eldering. You know what I mean? It's real nice because in a way, it's almost like they've been watching and waiting for the next wave of astrology to do what it's going to do. And that includes the next wave of astrologers. And I have been met with nothing but people who are welcoming from all shades to say, yep, if you're going to do astrology, let's make you the best astrologer you can be and get you going.
Particularly, I mean, even though, you know, we get into, you know, boomer matches, right? In terms of talking about the boomers, one thing I'll definitely give credit to, especially as I learn more history from them, more astrological history. Like Rick Levine's generation, like Stephen Forrest's generation, Ray Merriman. One thing they talk about is that when they were our age, maybe, I mean, I think you're a little younger. I know you are, but just a little bit. But when they were younger, they didn't necessarily have people, their elders, looking out for them. They had their elders saying, like, you wait, it's not your turn. And they had other issues that would baffle us now. So for instance, Ray Merriman was just telling me maybe a few weeks ago how people from, you know, his older generation was kind of like, you want to charge for astrology? No, this is not what you should do, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, I was like, wow. They were really of that mindset, like, you know, it should be just as a gift. It is a gift to do. And I was like, well, how do you survive with just this gift? And so they had a whole different level of fight that we also have to recognize. And what they've paved the way for us as astrologers in general, and irrespective of the color that we are or the race of our background.
That's a beautiful thing. I was taking a walk last night and really realizing that in every way in my life today, I am a part of the generational flow, the generational waves that are starting to change a little bit. And then at every portion, I'm just in there. I'm just carrying what already was and making space for what's next. And that's regardless of color, right? Like, I'm making a way forward for the next astrologer that wants to practice. You and I talked about how, you know, in the setup of my business, a couple times a year, there are classes offered that you can absolutely afford, because I remember being a good astrologer and I couldn't take those big classes yet, but I was making my way, and I get to do that just the same way. Like, they get to do that now. They get to look out for who's next and just give them a pathway forward. So the next astrologer, the next whatever. It's exciting times. It is tumultuous times. That seems to be how humans do things, right? Like,
that's how we grow. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve.
Absolutely. Thank God plants don't do it the same way. We'd never see anything attractive, right?
Oh no. I mean, you know, I don't know. Maybe at a different rate of evolution. And even our evolution is slow, you know, compared to like what we would think it would be. But, you know, we're talking about millions of years, but yeah, in turbulent times and how things can change so fast, like the moon, right? I mean, like, it's the thing that I guess we're going to talk about in just a second. Yeah, but I mean, one last thing I'll say about, you know, the dimensions related to like this generational flow, and I like the way you put it. I'm always in touch with some other aspect of that too, which is, you know, you and I have been in the making for thousands, if not millions of years, and specifically related to the Black continuum and experience in this country, at least, you know, for 400 years in that sense. Now, why that's important is, you know, I'm not the first iteration of an occultist in my family. And so I'm part of a development as part of a process that may continue in my family, but it may continue apart from my direct genetic lineage into someone else. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something also to be attentive to, and not just lose that in the sense that it doesn't matter the color. I think it does matter to the degree that I want some, if not more, you know, of that influence coming into the community. But, you know, many of my students are white. Many of my clients are white. So that doesn't matter. Right. But what does matter, like, one last thing I'll say about that is that when I was starting off, I would say 90%, if not 95% of my clientele was white. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think about it. I know that sounds strange. I didn't think about it. I was like, oh, I was just happy to have clients and whatever, and just doing it. until like a sister friend of mine, noticing who was coming to the apartment because she was over for tea or something one time. And she was just like, you see a whole bunch of white women. I was like, okay, yeah. And she's like, what about any sisters and, black people? And I was like, that's true. I mean, I got these 2 degrees in black studies. I'm like, why don't I? And I had to really think, why didn't that happen more? Because it wasn't like I was obviously saying like, no Negroes here.
Right.
Right. So I had to kind of reach out and think about what ways in which I can be inclusive and make sure I was being inclusive. Because I also think about that now in terms of my LGBTQ sisters and brothers, right?
Right.
So I think that's the way in which I think about, how we broaden our arms.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
I agree.
because we have a generational flow.
The generational flow. Either way,
obliged.
All we have to do is leave the space open, and the people coming home are going to come home, and we let them know that the door and the space is open. There we go.
Said.
Let's talk about the moon. This is crazy, fast moving moon, right? Governing reactions to things, the emotional body, the people. And we got it running through all sorts of signs. We have it running around the zodiac as quickly as possible. The moon is the sprinter of the astrology game.
I like the way you put that, the sprinter.
He's like, that's why at noon you're feeling like, yes, this is my life. And at 5, you're like, let me think about my life. You got to like get back in there. But this is a place where I think about it a lot online. I think about a lot of the reactions we're seeing from people. And I wonder about, where is your moon? Why is that coming out that way? How could that be? How could there be more depth with that? How could that be tempered into something useful? Do you know about your moon placement? So these are questions I kind of think of, and we rapped a little bit about it, but what's your take on the moon in these changing times?
I think it's really important to pay attention to your natal moon. I pay attention a lot to the transiting moon. So for instance, I have, and this is not about Taurus, by the way, I'm saying this because I know you're sun in Taurus, but I call the moon, the transiting moon in Taurus, a crypto moon. I came up with something years ago, because what I observed from looking at particular cycles is that every time the moon in Taurus, I felt a certain kind of fatigue, wanting to sleep longer, luxuriate, all the things I don't like to do, right? Because of my Mars-driven self, my Mars in Capricorn. It's like work, structure, get it done. Mm-hmm. But, sleeping in a little bit. No, get up for prayer, do this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And so it was learning to make more peace with the transiting moon in Taurus, for example, my crypto moon. And a crypto moon, I've come to realize, is not predictable, meaning that you have to be, and this is what I'm saying ultimately, people should be attentive to the transiting moon and observing kind of what seems to happen on a monthly basis, because when the moon goes into Gemini, I think that's a very productive time for me in terms of communication and writing. That may be very different for someone else, but you have to kind of know. And it may not be, the moon in Taurus is my 3rd house, the transiting moon in Taurus. I wouldn't have thought like that would be like, even though it's opposite to my sun, it's wildly opposite to my sun. But even with this moon square to my sun in Aquarius, not necessarily, or in the 12th house, not the same thing, different thing. So I think it's good for people to be attentive to the transiting moon. Like the moon is in Gemini now. I had to look up. I was like, where exactly is it? So right now on the East Coast, at least, it's 12 degrees Gemini. So that is going to be ringing true. And then we have this eclipse. Let me say it again. This eclipse. 0 degrees Cancer in the sign of the moon. It's at what we call the Aries point, which means that it is at a significant point that rings true through all the cardinal signs, Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer. And then by virtue of that resonance, it seems to focus and resonate on the world axis. And what that means is that somehow you're going to see it. So if you have something at 0 degrees of those cardinal signs I just mentioned, Libra, Aries, Capricorn, and Cancer, and I would say with an orb of, I give 8 degrees. Some give less, some give more.
I give less. I am stingy.
Okay, you're stingy with your orbs?
I am.
Oh, wow.
I am orb stingy.
Well, what orb would you give?
No, I give 5. I'm like,
okay,
all
right. I give 3 more. I give 3 more. Okay, I'm quarter Italian, so I give it 3 more.
Just give it a little more.
A little more, right? So I think you're going to feel it, and that's significant because we have Mercury retrograding in Cancer, sign of the moon. Mm-hmm. We have this eclipse happening. So we started off, or at least I started off talking about the transiting moon, but it's also going to be really important for you to be in touch with your natal moon. And, I can go through sign by sign, or we can go through sign by sign to talk about what's important, in these turbulent times, how you anchor it. So I have nicknames for some of the moons. Some are more colorful than others. So for Aries, the Aries moon, if you have a natal moon in Aries, I have 2 nicknames for that. I call it the victory lap moon and the energy junkie moon, right? Both fit. Energy junkie is probably the most immediate to grasp. And that means that there's a high drive and love of the expression of energy, both in terms of giving and receiving from the moon in Aries. And the victory lap, a little harder to kind of break down, but victory lap is kind of like when you're ready to win a race, you kind of go again around to lap up the love and the attention. And what am I saying? I'm saying that moon in Aries thrives on having victories, but they also, and this is better than just saying attention, they also need witnesses. So what's important during this particular time in dealing with turbulence is recognizing when you're not getting the energy that you need, whether you're creating that energy, in terms of burning that off through exercise or doing something or just walking. I love that you love to walk, for example, right? So that's kind of a way to kind of honor. I mean, I know you don't have a, energy junkie moon, but you get the idea, right? Right. So you get the way in which you want to burn off the energy. I think it's also important to know when your partner or significant people in your life are not reciprocating with that energy, when you're kind of giving a lot of energy and you're not getting it back. You kind of saying like, look at this flower, isn't it great? Yeah, that's cool. That's not what moon and Aries love to thrive on. Moon and Taurus. Do you want to say anything about the moon and Aries, or do you want me? How do you want to work this?
We'll just talk a little. It'll be good. I was thinking about too in the reciprocation in relationships in general. We see it in astrology, psychology, pickenology. We pretty much see it. If your moon's not being fed, you're going to start to make some real different decisions, and they are innately self-absorbed because you're trying to get a need nurtured. The moon will really drive some of our behaviors, especially if we're not fed. So if you're feeling like in your personal relationships, go back to your moon. What is it that you actually need? Because perhaps you're not even presenting or bringing to the table what it is that you need and offering your partner the opportunity to feed you. So take a look at it, get to know your moon for a minute, and then you can make a lot of changes there without having to get a divorce. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to get a divorce, but you can make a lot of changes just digging into what it is that you even actually need. And the other thing I was thinking about with that Aries moon is this is a time of high information. Air and fire really tend to like each other, right? So, and Aries moon is not innately the most patient placement we've got. So I want to say something, I want it now, because I don't have a vision of what if I wait a while, gather all the information, and then say something. So if you're feeling that jumping urge to, I got to say it now, just a minute, the information may actually come to you, and then you can take a passionate position that actually does something useful for you. Let's do that.
Why don't you take off with Moon and Taurus, and then I'll jump in.
Okay, awesome. Moon and Taurus. This is so funny. It's your crypto moon, which, when the moon comes to Taurus, I'm like, oh, it feels so good. feels so nice. I should take a bath. As a Taurus, I feel that way. But the moon in Taurus, this is slower. It's more grounded. It's earthy. There is a steadiness that comes to this. There is a sense of our senses that comes with this particular moon. And it is one that I like, actually forces or leads us to pay a little bit more attention to our actual material needs or our senses. Have you been wearing that terrible shirt and you think it's so cute, but the tag itches you? Get rid of it, right? A moon in Taurus will be encouraging to you to look at your home, your senses, your foundations. What is steady and what is stable for you? The other thing is during the moon in Taurus phase, if you want to commit to something, I find that to be a wonderful energy to do that with, because Taurus is earth. We're going to go not only on the earth, but we'll go down and in. That's kind of a long-term journey, but all of the gems are down there. Even when we look at that alchemical symbol for earth, we're down and in, finding all the good stuff. So it is a delicious moon for making commitment. Now, it is also a moon when somebody's looking for an action or a reaction from you, right? You be very slow to give it. You're mad 2 weeks from now, right? Like you figure out 2 weeks from now how you feel about that, or you're going to take the practicality of your feelings, which sometimes feelings and actions need a little bit more speed. So I think this is a beautiful moon to re-gauge the quickness of your responses to certain things, because sometimes things just need an answer, you know? What do you got?
I think that, well, what you said was wonderful. And I call the moon in Taurus the give me body moon, kind of like taking a line from Queen Latifah. And she says, give me body. And I think all that you said, I think the challenge that can happen for the moon in Taurus is when you can prioritize your comfort to the point that you're not willing to risk discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it becomes important to know when comfort is getting in your way.
Sure.
And to kind of be willing to kind of come out of your comfort zone in terms of like what makes you not just feel safe, but and secure, but even feel luxurious, right? You know, it's ways in which you have stepped too deeply into your ease and prioritize your ease and not recognizing the dis-ease and discomfort of others around you. Sure. And so it's where you must also kind of be ready and willing to share some dimension of your wealth and appreciation of your wealth, and not just think that it's just due to you. And I think that's one of the lessons of exalted planets, and the moon is exalted in Taurus. Yeah. And what can happen with planets in their exaltation is that they can get attitude, you know, and the moon in Taurus can get a certain attitude about itself and what it enjoys, not realizing that it's been given what it has as a gift.
Yes.
All right, I'll go into Gemini and then pass it on to you. And I think we'll get through all 12.
We're going to make it, Sam.
We're going to make it. That sounds like Laverne and Shirley. That's perfect for Gemini, right? Do you remember Laverne and Shirley? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I'm of age.
Okay. No, I don't want to put it, you know, who knows, you know, because sometimes people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm married to a millennial. So sometimes she's like,
oh, good.
I don't know what you mean. I call it, let's make a deal moon. And you know, the thing that's powerful about the moon in Gemini, what I really love about that moon is that it's a moon that in many ways goes against the impulses of the moon, which is kind of more about rationality. Well, it's more about, the moon is about irrationality and emotion and gut, what feels right. Whereas in a Mercury driven sign, it has to kind of think through before it gets into feeling or gut or security. So the moon in Gemini is a lot more driven toward risk and thinking like, well, what if, you know, like, yeah, mom says biker guys are dangerous, but you know, he's kind of cute. Maybe I might go out with him and see what happens. So they're willing to hazard more. The downside that sometimes people experience with moon in Gemini, which is no fault to them sometimes, there is some fault that they have because sometimes they can kind of be too much in their heads, not thinking also with their guts and their emotions,
Sure.
is that sometimes people read that they're not loyal, or they misperceive their loyalties because they think they're going to be just all in their heads and not necessarily going along with this, what, viscerally should make sense. One brilliant illustration of this is Barack Obama. So, he has multiple factors in this chart that contributes to this, but I've always kind of thought about his moon in Gemini and how people respond to, like, well, he's very cerebral, and, they laid that as a fault with him, but also always kind of guessing, well, where is he on this? And also it's funny, like, is he black? Is he white? Is he this? It's always this kind of this duality thing with him. And I think that often happens. So what I often tell people with the moon in Gemini, it's very important for you to be proactive and stick to understanding why you make certain decisions and what really is informing those decisions, and telling people, like, well, I don't want to go to, like, the band shell park, or, to look at this concert because it's going to rain. It's not because I don't want to hang out with you. It's not just the opportune thing to do in the rain. So I think that's kind of the struggle with the Gemini moon.
Yeah. Well, and it's nice because Mercury's in Cancer right now. So this is the same kind of vibe where we get an opportunity to take our emotional intelligence to a different place as well. To really, like you said, think about why I'm doing what I'm doing. And sometimes think about why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it's kind of making me feel some sort of way. Where am I involved in my own emotional chaos right now? I have to tell you, my moon and Gemini people, I always love, because I feel like they've always got a project somewhere. Right? Like, it's just like, oh yeah, I'm working on this thing. You know what I mean? And they can be all of these little projects, and they're usually trying to reorganize it or revamp it or do something like that to it. But it's just like little projects. I find that completely interesting. It personally. Just in a personal way. So, maybe even too, when the moon is in Gemini, maybe work on a project that you already started. Try and have a mutable time with that. Blend it into the next thing so you can move on.
Exactly.
That could be nice. Okay, the moon in Cancer, he's home. She is home. This energy is happy to live and to rule over there and to just be, right? But this is the moon in a cardinal space. This moon, I think, is intuitively and instinctively set to make some moves forward, to make some decisions, just as easily, I think it's happy to get wrapped in the emotionalism that is available there. But certainly with that high vibe in cardinal water, I trust my intuition forward. I trust my instincts forward. Now, I always find that when the moon is rolling through Cancer, I'm trying to be in the house. I'm like, I'm good to go. I truly am not real interested in being out, or wherever I am out. We went camping and the moon was in Cancer, and I could tell because all I wanted to do was make a home out of our campsite. And I'm like herding and like chomping other people to get into the campsite so that they're safe and they're at home, and we're going to make s'mores and do together-esque kinds of things, with that moon over there. So there's a strong attachment to home, to what makes me emotionally secure, what's my internal foundation looking like at an emotional level. I love it for family things, traditional Cancer things, family, getting back to the past. Beautiful for meditation, I think, in my experience. So the moon in Cancer, though, can be insecure, right? This can be, so that's a lot. I think there's a lot to be said about that. It can be very, very insecure. So that is something that would be one of the watchwords to be paying attention to. And we're getting ready to have a blasto eclipse in the energy of Cancer. Insecurities will definitely be uncovered in our cardinal energies, but certainly where your Cancerian placements are at in your chart.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would add about the moon in Cancer, especially since we're about to go into, it being magnified by 5, by 10, is that it's good to think about safety and security, but also think about ways in which that also, you know, the blanket becomes too snug. And you can become too beholden to what is, you know, yours and thine. You know, it's like, well, you know, I'm going to take care of mine, and not realizing that some measure of, you know, who belongs to you is not always those who just came from you.
Sure.
Right. And so I think it's kind of good to tend to family of all kinds, including the one that you chose in your chosen family, which we call friends. Right. So I think that's going to be an important thing. It's also important to think about ways in which you've kind of become like Taurus, like the moon in Taurus, where the moon also gets exalted, where you become too snug, and where you're like not hazarding any risks. But I think for the most part, everything you said is spot on.
Yeah.
Moon in Leo. I have a nickname for the moon in Leo. I call it the "Who the fuck are you moon?" And the thing, I'll talk about it at least on two levels, especially in terms of these times. One is figuring out who you are and what you know allows for your sense of expression and full sense of self. And then the other part is where you also are more daring, you know, in terms of getting beyond the safety of that moon in Cancer and going toward like, you know what? I feel like painting. And if you feel like doing yoga in the nude, or you want, wherever it becomes, like, it depends on where you do it. And I'm not encouraging you to go to some public park.
Okay, moon and Leo people. That was not
right. That was not right. But there are other things that you can do or you have thought to do that could be more expressive of who you are. So that's what I would say about the moon and Leo.
It's the moon of joy. This is the moon of joy. This is the moon of play. We get to be big. We get to laugh. We get to be a little bit of the center of attention. Don't go crazy, right? But I also think that it's just the moon of joy. What brings me joy? How can I bring joy to others? I feel like every time the moon moves into the energy of Leo, whether or not you're feeling it, not feeling it, the question of, in this moment, where is joy available is so wonderful. Because Leo will naturally kind of gravitate towards the joy, towards the play, towards the, it's dramatic, right? There's a drama in living joyfully. There's a drama in saying the thing and painting the thing and being naked at the place. There's a drama, there's a joy in it, and there's great, great, great play in it. So I love that. And it's a nice moon if you're, you want to make eyes at the ice cream shop guy.
No one ever talks about hitting on the ice cream truck guy.
I know, he's so nice. I'm sure. I don't know him, but he's probably nice.
And he's cool.
Where's at the ice cream shop? Who's not, right? Okay, we're gonna keep going. Moon in Virgo. Clean your house. Clean your house. Clean your life. Deep condition your hair. Oh my God, get like 6 extra sit-ups in there. The things that are happening in our lives when the moon is in Virgo can just, the integrity of them can come to a different level. And they come to a different level because I feel like the moon gives us this thing that says we've got to get this whole project done, but let's do this little thing step by step, and we're going to do it with the highest level of integrity available. It is such a beautiful, I'm super earth, you can tell, I'm like, it's beautifully practical. It's beautifully practical. Run those errands, finish up the things that need to be done, because this is a mutable moon as well to take you into the next thing. But what are the small details that need to be done? Really floss, like really floss during the moon in Virgo. Get into the deep crevices, right?
Yep. I can call the moon in Virgo fitting to get ready moon. So, you know, so it's kind of like, you know, all the things you said, and the readiness, the preparation, you know, the cleanliness, the attentiveness, I would say, and proficiency and efficiency. Yeah. But I think one trap to be careful of is, you know, a lot of people think of Virgo related to perfection. I don't think Virgo is about perfection. I think it's about preparation, being ready. And sometimes a thing can be ready without being perfect. So you have to kind of acknowledge when something is ready enough, when you worked on that proposal or that project or that presentation enough, rather than thinking, you know, and also to recognize when you are enough, You know, particularly I'm talking to many of our sisters out there of any hue, where you kind of think like, well, I have to kind of do more and more and more, where, you know, not recognizing that you may have the proficiency enough. So it's kind of acknowledging and being open to change and flexibility. So you don't want to be too rigid, but at the same time, knowing that you are doing the work. So
Virgo is prepared. Forever the Boy Scout, Girl Scout.
Girl Scout, yep.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We've got
Libra.
in Libra. I approve.
I wonder why.
I know. All my berries are gone.
I have my nickname for the moon in Libra is right by your side, and I am quoting Sade here. And it is a partnership. It's a ratio moon, you know, in terms of thinking about the ratio between things. So that's relationship. That's also beauty. It's also justice, right? You know, in terms of being attentive to what's just and unjust. But I think the key thing in turbulent times for the moon in Libra, again, similar to the moon in Gemini, is being in touch with your emotions and not just the idea and ideal of things. And, you know, when you have like the perfect moment with the family and the perfect moment in terms of their relationship, rather than where it is, which might be in a good place and be solid, or it might be in a bad place and you're, you know, fixated on what it was, you know, what it could have been, you know, rather than what it is. So I would say with the moon in Libra, be also very attentive to what's happening.
Yes. Well, it's an air moon. We got to think about our feelings. I got to think about how I feel about that. But the trick with, I think, all air moons is to drop back into the actual emotional body of what is happening, right? So that is always an interesting place. And what am I in relation to? A moon in Libra will innately kind of make me go, hold on, I'm out of balance somewhere. And that's a good use, I think, of that moon to say, oh, I need a little bit more, or I need a little bit less over here. It's a nice balancing time of the month. I mean, we're human beings. In 28 days, we are quite capable of taking on a little extra or putting down a little bit too much and, you know, jacking up our scales a little bit so we get to reinforce there. I also feel like the moon in Libra is a really good time if you need help. Virgo and Libra, I think if you need help, to say I need help, to get help, to allow reinforcements to come to the table, or to be the reinforcement that comes to someone else's table to help balance those scales. So it's lovely.
And moon in Scorpio, I call that, you know, the never again moon. So sometimes you can kind of get so much into an invulnerability that you're not willing to hazard a vulnerability, which is necessary. You have to be willing to be open to hurt, to pain. I'm not saying go look for it, like, oh, hurt me, please. As much as recognizing that the path of love almost commands, requires, maybe that's a better word, requires us to be open and not kind of seal ourselves off or become too defensive. You know, like, I'm going to get you before you get me. So it's a different level of being present, and it's being present with your full emotional self rather than the fear of what can happen to self.
Yeah. Well, and that Scorpio, I think in general, the magic of their what seems like protectiveness, or kind of seems like that mysterious realm that they live in, is to protect that high level of vulnerability. This is a water energy. The moon's in a water energy. So it's like, I'm not holding back because I'm terrible and mysterious, but it's because I'm so open. When I open, right? When I let it happen, I let it happen. It is deep, and there's a lot of vulnerability there. So I think coming from that perspective, even at this moon, and understanding that the intuition and the vulnerability is high with this particular placement, that gives it lets a lot of people off off the hook, that they're not just over there being weird, deep, mystical creepers, you know?
Right.
Like there's so much more going on in that particular energy, but this is fixed water. So you can commit to wellness as well. Commit to not having to be the one with the power all the time, or taking the power where it needs to be taken, right? There's an intensity that comes with looking at where my power has slipped out of my grasp, where I've maybe handed it off somewhere. So I think that's a nice intensity of this moon.
I agree. We're going into the home stretch, the final four.
When it's final four. Remember when they say that like on the basketball? Was it basketball?
Right. Final four. Yeah, it is.
Baseball? I don't
March
know.
Madness. Back in the day when we had like live basketball.
Oh, you remember that one time before Corona?
Right.
Okay.
I say Sagittarius. Well, do you want to take Sagittarius? Because you just did Scorpio. I think you're supposed to flip it.
Whatever.
Like,
this is the adventurer's moon. This is the adventurer's moon, right? I have to see some things. I need to know some things. This is also a fire moon, so I need space to spread out. I need a lot of that going on, but it's easy going. I really like that about this moon. It's relatively easy going, but they need to be able to be active and go find things, gather information, gather emotional information, gather information about why does this make me feel this way. That is a wonderful demonstration, I think, of that particular moon, because the thing I love about Sag energy is it is innately very nosy. It needs to know, and then it needs to share the information it's gathered, right? I want to give and I want to share information. I want to teach. I want to share what I just saw. I got to pull back for a minute so that I can go forward in that archer's way, is what is, I think, really innate of this moon. This is also the moon, in my experience of my clients, that can be a runner's moon, right? Like, oh no, you're over here getting deep. I've keep it high level or I'm out. You know what I mean? So I think that this is, an energy where they just, you got to remember not to run. Sometimes you do have to stand and stay your ground, right? You have to stand and figure out everything that's happening in here. And that is deep, and that is absolutely beautiful. And it's not always jovial. It's not always all the happy stuff.
Boom.
Right?
That's very true.
Not always all the happy stuff. So they got those good thighs to help them run off or stand their ground.
Yeah, I call this moon I only play crazy. Yeah, I think what you said, but I also think that with the moon in Sag, especially, during the transiting moon in Sag, there's a way in which you might think there's always greener pastures. There's always more to know. And then always you might also be of the mind that you are already in the know. Sometimes you have to kind of sit still, stand still, and let the cosmos or God be God, however you want to frame it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of more, rather than thinking like I have to go off to the next thing, be willing to understand that the next thing may be coming to you.
Sure. Maybe the adventure is in the road trip you didn't plan.
Correct.
Right. That's all right too. All right, moon in Capricorn.
Okay, you take it away.
Okay, this is practical. This is a practical moon. The moon is actually in what we call detriment here, but even detrimental planetary placements, I think, can be very, very useful. This is where we start to feel competent and confident about what's going on. I'm going to get grounded. I need to get emotionally a little bit serious about what's going on. I maybe have some emotions boiling beneath the surface. This is in the earth. Capricorn's an earth energy. But I'm going to keep cool with how I present that, right? Capricorn energy does tend to care quite a bit about what other people think of it. So you're not going to be out in public losing your tacos. That is not a strong representation of this particular moon sign. But instead, what I think is a danger of this particular moon sign is not to allow the warmth, right? It's deep, it's penetrating, things are happening down there, but it lacks a little bit of warmth sometimes, which can be misconstrued to I'm just way too serious, right? And it can also be that, like, kind of feel like that barrier towards having that emotional discussion, right? There's people are like, you're just too practical. Do you have any feelings in there? I do have plenty of feelings in there, but I'm going to show you some clear boundaries around those feelings, around the things that I do, because I'm trying to achieve here, right? My heart of hearts believes in success, in greatering, bettering, moving forward, right? This is a good manager's moon too. It really is phenomenal for getting some things in order, right? During the Capricorn moon time, I'm like, Stormy Grace, let's get our life. 30 days we've managed to need to get our life. That's the beauty of humanity though, right? You get in 30 days, we can handle about a 30-day cycle, y'all.
A lot can change.
A lot can I change in 30 days.
Right. I call this moon, you want fries with that shake? And it's kind of taken from, what happens when we go to, some fast food places where you just get the minimum, the basics, the duty bound aspects of it. And that can happen with the moon in Capricorn, where they learn early maybe that, especially those who have the natal moon in Capricorn, that it's kind of like, not do the minimum as in laziness, but do the minimum as like, okay, I got to do what's required, get it done regardless. So you can get so bound up in duty that you aren't dealing with desire. Mm-hmm. So one of the deeper aspects of Capricorn, specifically as an earth sign, is that never forget its relationship to the word capricious, whimsical. So there is an aspect of Capricorn where we have to kind of get beyond just the duty-bound sensibility of it and more into the deeper desire that really comes from the earth, the whimsical aspect of it that also can make it fun, so that you don't end up, with the Joker visiting you going like, why so serious? So that's kind of the thing.
You're on top of a car, yes.
I'm going to do Aquarius, or start off with Aquarius, penultimate.
Yeah, I'll do it. Okay, moon in Aquarius. These people, this particular phase of the moon is good for looking above the horizon line. What else is up there? What's out there? I'm watching, I'm listening, I'm seeing what else is happening around me. We can innovate a little bit here, right? Oh, these people, I just love a good cause. Moon in Aquarius at the gym is a trip. I don't know if anybody's ever paid attention to that, but when the moon is in Aquarius at the gym, people are putting other people's weights back. It's a very nice little community that seems to happen there because it's very, I'm in the group. I'm here. I'm social. I am slightly detached emotionally because I'm in an air energy, but I can be kind. I can be friendly. I can see that there is more to offer. Right? This is, I think, a very, very friendly and progressive kind of moon. So during the lunar cycle, this is a nice time to look over your horizon. Maybe there's a way that you're doing something or thinking about something or feeling about something, that some progression, some innovation, some surprise could come to the table for sure. And the moon in Aquarius sometimes, in my experience, does just bring a surprise where you're like, oh, well, where did that come from? Where did that get in there? Bringing any kind of Uranian energy. You put water and electricity together and it's exciting. Sometimes that's exciting. It's a great spiritual conduit in my experience as well, right? Water and electricity is a great place for spirit to speak to us. So if that is something that, you know what I mean, you can dig into that. Now the challenge, I think, truly, again, and because this is an air energy, is that it can be emotionally kind of shut out, right? We have to drop back in. The air energies have to drop into the emotional body, not detach from it, to really know what's going on. Because what happens as an air moon, I can tell you what happens is 6 months down the road, I really realize how I feel about what happened with whatever. And then I'm going to say something, right? And people have already moved on. They forgot what happened 6 months ago, but I've had time to think about it. Really do some thinking about these emotions.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. My nickname, similar to what you said, I'd say, speaking of the X-Files, the truth is out there, and so am I for the Aquarius moon. And I think there's this pursuit for truth. But truth also happens on multiple levels, and it's not always up here. It's not always something that you can read. It's not always something that you can view on YouTube. It is sometimes something that comes in the quiet of the night in a dream. It comes to you through the voice of your lover and how you feel it. So there's much more intimate ways in which you experience truth rather than always looking out there. And I don't mean like in the Sagittarian kind of way, but
Sure.
sometimes going for what might be the most outrageous, what might be the most innovative. You know, there's a strong penchant toward innovation that runs through the Aquarius theme. And the best way to use that energy, apart from the natal in the transiting, is kind of what you said in terms of building community, connecting, being attentive, more so to how you experience a collective notion of truth that is not just built on your own experience, sort of what we were just talking about with our experience of Blackness. Last but not least, Pisces. I'll start off and then you can wrap it up with that one. My nickname for the Pisces moon is I see dead people, fairies, angels, and that mustard stain. What I mean by that is that the Pisces moon is a very absorptive moon. It's almost like Bounty, the quicker picker upper, right? In terms of the things that it kind of takes from the people around them. And so both natally and by transit, a Pisces moon needs space to kind of wring itself out. But I give very specific ideas on how you can wring yourself out, whether you have a natal Pisces moon or a transiting Pisces moon. I do not think vegging out or kind of going drip by drip with binge watching is the way to deal with the Pisces moon. And that's not because I have something inherently against those things, but what can happen is that, you know, when you're watching television or watching like something, you're still absorbing a lot of energy. You know, all you need is one stressful moment. You're like, oh shit, you know, and you're just feeling it. And you're like, you know, and so you're still decompressing the work that you were absorbing from work or whatever situation you were in. So I usually recommend, you know, where you might like bathe, you know, like have a luxurious bath or shower, meditation, coloring, you know, getting your coloring book out, playing some music. Active ways in which you can participate in something that is calming and soothing, and you can release some measure of what you've absorbed. That's my take.
Yeah. And I will tell you, Venus in Pisces and Pisces moon people, to me, you guys have some dark sense of humor. I'm always surprised. I'm like, that's like kind of dark, you know what I mean? But I can see the humor in it as well. And I think it's interesting because these placements always tend to get the painting of they're just sweet and they're so soft. I'm like, these people walk between multiple dimensions at any given moment. They have access to a world that is not always light and crispy. You know, sometimes it is a little bit dark, but having access to both of those things and having access, especially like you said, it's such an absorptive moon. I think moving between multiple realms is also quite stressful. It's a mutable moon. So any of the mutable moons, I think, always can benefit for some dark and some quiet, because mutabilities, man, y'all will worry. It can create worry. It can create this sense of I'm trying to become something else, and instead of just stopping and being. But this is also a delicious moon to connect with those dreams, to connect with the meditation. Where this sits in your particular chart, wherever your Piscean energy aligns with this particular time of the moon, look at where you can trust or bring in between the worlds information into that area of your life. My descendant is who owns my Pisces energy, right? So this is a wonderful time for me to feel into my relationship, to just feel into it. What are we doing here? Are we going to pray together this time? Do I need to do that on my own? It's just a wonderful time to kind of move in between the in-between worlds with that particular area of your chart. And yeah, the downside is pretty much anything that's going to make us want to escape, right? I'm like, well, a little Henny and some Netflix is probably not the most conducive use of this particular moon, also because it's boundaryless. So those 2 drinks are probably going to be more than 2 drinks.
Yep.
Absolutely. Sam.
So
about the moon on the internet.
all 12.
All 12.
There we have. You know, and we I guess we also framed it that we talked about transit and natal. So that's ways in which you can cope on at least 2 levels.
Yeah, and get to know it. I think that's the real a real message I would like to leave with is to get to know it. It's okay to sit and spend time with your moon and spend time in a 30-day period, a couple of them, and see, how do you feel? How do you feel in your body? How do you feel in your spirit and in your mind in a 30-day period as these energies are going through? And what's even better is to just kind of jot it down, right? Jot down how you're feeling, then go back and see where the moon
Have a
is.
journal. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, because if you jotted down how you were feeling, what was coming up that day, and then you look back and it's consistent every time the moon's in Gemini, I want to go do all of this, then you can kind of see your own mode of operation.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Do you have anything to leave us with?
Yes. First, thank you for this conversation and having me on your show. I have a bestie. I told him, you know, I guess he saw I was going to be on your show. And he's like, "What's your sun, moon, and rising?" And I was like, "You know, I'm not going to tell you that. I mean, like, whatever." But she's like, "Oh yeah, man." He's really excited. So I don't know if he's watching. But
Awesome.
yeah. So I'm really happy that you have me on your show, that we had this conversation, that we could approach it in the spirit of love and clarity. And if people want to contact me, they can contact me at unlockastrology.com in terms of my website. And in terms of my email, it's unlockastrology@gmail.com. And if they want to check me out on my raunchy, crazy Twitter feed, they can follow me at SF Reynolds. So that's Sam Fred Reynolds, SF Reynolds, at twitter.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that all of that information is in the description box down below for you guys as well. So you can head over and check out Sam. And I'm also going to put the link to ISAR in case people would like to come check that out. We have many people who are starting to organization up, but it's always nice to know a friendly face as you're coming over there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also if you're interested in certification, you know, certification is a great way to learn what you don't know, because often what I find when you're like learning on your own, you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good way to learn that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming over. Thank you guys for showing up and giving us your time and your attention. Hopefully we earned it today. The solstice gifts will be out. Check the description box down below. And then you can also find them on Facebook and Instagram as well. And this is our last eat and greet for like 2 days, which seems like a long time around here because we've been having them all the freaking time. But next week we will be welcoming Rick Levine as well. Elizabeth Grace will be here and we'll be talking about hemispheres, which, as you may know, are my favorite. If you've ever taken a class with me, we start out with hemispheres because I'm in love with them, and Elizabeth Grace is in love with them as well. So we'll get the opportunity to experience that. So thank you guys so much. Like this video, comment, share, subscribe. If you're watching on the podcast as well, give me a cool little star, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.